Yet another slow start leads to a loss for the UCF Knights.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me as he does every Monday is my good friend, Andrew Gluco from the Last Word on Sports. I'm going to give him the first word on this topic right after we let you know that this episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Looks like they might have got it wrong here on the pick'em spread for this one, Andrew.
Man, this team just on paper, it reminds me of one of my fantasy football teams. On paper, they look great. In reality, they don't. This is a team that cannot put it together. You know, it's almost surreal at how this seems to work out.
Yeah, it was a tough watch. But look, man, as we do most days after the game, we're going to start with RJ Harvey. He was their most productive offensive players, although the stats may be a little skewed in terms of how the game actually went.
Yeah, the numbers are a little bit deceptive. RJ Harvey, 130 yards in the day, but more than half of those came on 3 carries. So if you take those away, it's 13 for 56. You know, if you take those 3 carries out of it. So overall, no one really shined. And that's one reason why UCF lost. RJ Harvey does RJ Harvey things, but there wasn't enough of it. And that's unfortunate because in my opinion, he did enough. The rest of the team did not. And that really falls on a bad game by Dylan Rizk. I mean, first half was just absolutely atrocious. 4 of 9, 32 yards. The first quarter is where UCF really, really shot themselves in the foot. They couldn't move the ball. And when they did, they found a way to screw it up. As you like to say, unforced errors. There was a fumble, driving down the field between Rizk and Miles Montgomery, completely killed any chance of momentum. West Virginia jumps up to a 14-0 lead before UCF's offense really can get back on track. By then, they had a buffer, and that buffer never went away. The closest that UCF ever got was within one score, but then West Virginia would always respond, bump it back up, and the Knights just could not get over the hump.
The second quarter touchdown by RJ Harvey was ridiculous. They had him dead to rights in the backfield, and he just pulls off a complete Houdini act. But I want to go back to the slow start here because RJ Harvey, as you mentioned, if you take out the 3 big plays, he averaged about 4.3 yards per carry on the rest of them, which is not the worst day in the world. But certainly we're not pinning this loss on him. UCF started this game punt, fumble, punt, touchdown, punt, and then they went at halftime with 7 points. This is not a team designed to overcome slow starts.
No, they're not. I mean, if you look at the second half, they actually had a decent second half. Punt, touchdown, failed 4th down conversion, touchdown. When you actually look at that's serviceable. But the first half was just absolutely a train wreck. I don't know if it was the weather. It was cold. It was yicky. I don't know if that played a role, but there was something not connecting. And you watched the replay, more than once, as you're studying your stuff. I watched the replay.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I mean, we haven't really seen much of it just because they don't show it. But I mean, after that first drive, Dylan Rizk gets an earful from Gus Malzahn after that bad deep pass to end that first drive. I mean, he just got an absolute earful. So, I mean, is this a case of desperation? As we know, UCF fans are calling for Gus Malzahn's head. They want him out. And, as we've seen from his time in Auburn, we've heard this song before.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, the fate of Gus Malzahn is something that we're going to cover quite a bit this offseason, until the time that UCF puts out a statement reaffirming their commitment to him as the head coach down here. But look, Andrew, at the rest of the running game now, last week you pointed at Montgomery as maybe being a potential key to this game for UCF. He had 8 carries for 46 yards, 5.8 yards per carry. Did they get away from the run game just a little bit too much here? Given how poorly I felt Dylan Rizk played.
Well, I mean, part of it is you have to look at, what the game gives you. You look at first half, didn't really do a lot of, but they had to rely on him more in the second half, and he had a better second half. 7 to 12, 140 yards and a touchdown. That's serviceable. But because they were down, West Virginia scores a touchdown late. They get the second half kick. So I mean, the momentum is all on the Mountaineers. You're playing on the road. It's just all on the Mountaineers. There's nothing you can really do about it. They had to kind of switch gears. They had to, I don't want to say abandon the run, but they couldn't focus on the run like they did. And you look at RJ Harvey's, carry, his numbers, all his best carries were in the first half. In the second half, he had 2 carries over 10 yards, none over 15. There was a lot of little bits, but the big plays that we expect from RJ Harvey just weren't there in the second. And I don't fully blame him. I don't blame him for that because he runs hard every play. This kid is absolutely phenomenal. He's one of the best to ever suit up at UCF. Local guy that and fans just absolutely adore him. He's a great character. Just absolutely great. But the offensive line has been much maligned, and if they're not getting the job done to open up holes for RJ Harvey, there's not much he can do. I mean, he can work with a little, but there's only so much he can do. The tackling by the Mountaineers was pretty solid. They did a pretty good job on their tackling.
I was impressed. Look, again, RJ Harvey, I wanted to make sure we gave him his due because he has been a lot of UCF's offensive success so far this season. But you need something from the other end. And, I don't feel like they got it in this one. But we're going to talk about Dylan Rizk's day in depth here right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Again, Andrew, the line was 2.5. I think it moved to 2 right before game time.
Last time I saw it was 3. So
3? Okay, all right. Yeah, look, I mean, either way, a pick 'em. It didn't turn out that way. But look, they got one more game left versus Utah here at the end. And no matter which side of the line you decide to bet on, go check out our friends at FanDuel. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Dylan Rizk. We've given Dylan a lot of props since he got promoted to QB1, but I thought this was his worst game as UCF's starting QB.
Easily.
Easily. 11 for 21 for 172 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. 52% completion percentage is just too low, man. I mean, in the first half, when I had to go back and rewatch the game, Andrew, and you know how it is on TV. You see more, you can see more, and there was no flow to this. He missed big throws. He missed routine throws. He was just off. And this was a bad day for Dylan Rizk. And I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback, but this team is not designed to win consistently having to overcome a handicap from the QB position.
Right. They're not. This isn't like West Virginia, who had a 3-man running attack.
Okay.
And hey, as you remember, one of my keys to the game was about, taking away the run, and they didn't. They didn't do anything remotely to that. In fact, West Virginia
yards allowed on the ground, and
had 20 more carries than UCF. It was 54-34. I mean, so they're obviously the average favored UCF, but I mean, they're just dinking and dunking, moving that ball just ever so slightly and converting on third or fourth down. I do have to call out UCF before we get back to Dylan Rizk. I do have to call out how West Virginia nailed fourth down conversions. They were 4 for 4.
Yeah.
Major reason why this game went the way they did. Another thing we've always talked about is third down defense, which was not there. Third down offense wasn't there either. And that's where Dylan Rizk comes into play.
Andrew, let me throw this to you. I mean, you mentioned 4 for 4 on fourth downs, but also only 2 penalties for 30 yards on West Virginia, 8 penalties for 58 yards on UCF.
And there was a lot of false starts and offsides again.
Sloppy game.
The unforced errors. That's a mental thing. Look, you're on the road. It's loud. I get it. You're going to be dealing with, you're on offense. You're going to be dealing with opposing teams yelling out stuff that maybe simulates snap counts. Refs try not to let them defenses do it. They get away with it plenty of times, though. You have to be mentally focused. There is no excuse. I mean, heck, even RJ Harvey got called for a false start. It was just all over the place. It wasn't just the offensive line, which is where it usually comes from. It was all over the place. No discrimination here, but these little, shoot yourself in the foot moments that take away scoring drives or allow the other team to stay on the field longer. And so it works both ways. Either way, UCF's penalties this game were, and even other games throughout the season, just a lot of just stupid mental mistakes. And it, if I'm on the coaching staff, at there's some point I'm banging the clipboard on my head, wondering like, what do I have to say to these guys to like focus? Because I guarantee you, this is stuff that gets hit every single game.
Well, Andrew, time of possession came up big in this one. West Virginia held the ball for 15 more minutes, almost 16 more minutes than UCF did in this one. You talked about their success on the ground. Like, look, the numbers weren't that different in terms of they only averaged 3.7 yards per carry. They had 200 yards, which is a decent day. UCF had 176 yards on the ground, but extending drives for West Virginia. They kept UCF off the field, and then when you did get on the field, you got missed throws. And I'm looking back here, 3 for 9 on third down, man. I mean, like,
you can't win like that.
You can't win like that. But the fact that you only had 9 third downs in this game points to your offense was on the sideline a lot of this one, while their offense was in the game.
Well, and the other thing to take a look at is your big plays. West Virginia only had 9 total big plays versus 11 for UCF.
Yep.
So most of West Virginia stuff was little stuff. They're making little plays. Hey, if you average 4 yards a play, you're going to make you're going to get constant first downs, on an average. And that's what was happening. They were able to stay on the field, and Brown is a very aggressive coach, loves going for it on fourth down. This was a go for broke moment for them. As we talked last week, I said, if UCF, the best position UCF could be in going into this game was with if West Virginia had won last week.
Yeah.
And already was ball. They were playing for something. And then I think it made them play even harder, and the fans got even more into it because they knew bowl eligibility was on the line. If they had won last week, bowl eligibility would have already been solved. That would have already been in the case. And I think they may have not have, had that much urgency. And again, that was another key of the game. Urgency. UCF didn't show it until the fourth quarter when the game was largely already in control by West Virginia. When they went tempo and finally pushed the ball, they pushed fast. It blows my mind that when UCF routinely goes tempo in the second half, it works, but then they pull back and they don't use it earlier in the game. You want to make the defenses uncomfortable, but
right.
You're not doing anything to make the defense uncomfortable. And when you do, it's really too late to, you're already, down 1-2 scores. And by the time, you really get, try to build some momentum, the cards are too stacked against you. I don't get it.
Yeah, it was, man, I'm telling you that there was a lot to be frustrated at watching this one. The way it ended was disappointing. I thought that Dylan Rizk, man, he had a chance. He had a chance to really put a stranglehold on the future of QB, I think, in these last two games. Yesterday left a lot in doubt, I think, for the future, not only for UCF, but for this coach. Because the uncertainty at that position certainly is something that people are going to point at in saying that they want to move on.
They want to move on, but UCF's problem is financial. This comes down to dollars and cents.
Yeah,
and you look at the buyout numbers, because this doesn't even, you're not even counting any assistant coaches that may have a multi-year contract. Like Ted Roof had a 2-year deal. So Ted Roof's due at least $700,000 still going forward. But if Gus is fired before December 1st, which is a week away, the buyout's 13.75. If it's after December 1st, which is really the end of the regular season, it's 12. You wait until next year after 2025, it goes down to 8.25, then 4.125, and then 0. So fans are all talking about, let's fire Gus. Let's fire Gus. Well, there's a financial commitment here that UCF does not have the cash for.
Yeah.
They're still paying off joining the Big 12. They actually had to take they had to extend their line of credit with the school to borrow money to get in. That already happened. They had to extend their line of credit by $5 million, had to borrow that $5 million as the entrance fee for the Big 12. They're still paying off the American for leaving. They've got these other projects that they have, they've had to take out bonds to line up for. As we know, the bulk of a coach's buyout is done within the first 30 days of when he's let go. So they're going to need most of that money in cash immediately. And I don't know if the university is going to give them an extra line of credit. They have to apply for that. It's not like, we'll just give you money. They had to go to they had to present to the school, the board of, for the university, and get that approved. So there's a process to be able to get that kind of money, even through a credit. So they don't have the money on hand. They don't have the credit to do it right now. So what are they going to do?
Yeah. I'll tell you this. I'm not sure moving on from Gus is the right decision in a lot of ways, but you do have to get it fixed. And that takes us back to the question we've been asking week after week as these losses have stacked up. What's left to play for? We're going to talk about that after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Andrew, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. You can filter out the fluff to show only the amazing deals that you're looking for. Here's how it works. Game Time Picks has curation that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, but especially sports, because that's what we love here at Locked On
Sports.
All-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front. No surprise fees at checkout, which is my favorite part. Don't tell me it's going to cost $80 more than I thought it was going to cost. Panoramic seat views, so you know exactly where you're sitting, and a low price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Andrew, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. What time is it, Andrew?
Game time.
What's left to play for? Prior to Saturday, you were fighting for your life for a bowl game. I cover another team who was in the exact same position on Saturday, and they got it done. And I can tell you, being around even though this season isn't what you thought, one thing I love about being around players is you get such a great sense of what these games mean to them, even in the bad seasons. And being around players on a 4-6 team coming into this past weekend and seeing one team get the win and seeing the joy that it brought. They were celebrating like it was their Super Bowl. In UCF, these guys wanted that feeling. They were playing for something. They took this seriously. They didn't get it done, but now you're not playing for a bowl game. I saw a UCF fan tweeted at me yesterday. He said, Mike G, we got to send RJ Harvey off right, man. Like, this kid stuck with us. Like, we have to send him. He gave us everything he had on the field. What's the rallying cry here in your mind over this last game? Like, what do you tell your team going up against Utah?
At this point, do it for yourselves. This is your chance to end on a positive note. For the younger guys, it's about building momentum, like to start the momentum for next year. Try the recovery process, because it hurts. You're 4-7. You're not going to a postseason game, so you know what? You cut that off right here now.
Yeah.
This next game is the start of next year. You play for that. And then for the seniors, the RJ Harveys, the Kobe Hudsons, the guys who don't have a tomorrow at UCF, you know what? It's, play for these guys. Give these guys the send-off they deserve. These are hardworking players. Ricky Barber, Quadric Buller. These are all hardworking players that have put blood, sweat, and tears into this program. And I know there's a lot of fans who may, not want to disrupt their Thanksgiving holiday, to go. But there's also many who understand these players could have left. They could have gone somewhere else. It's so easy now, but they stayed. And, and I got to give the fans a lot of credit. UCF fans are extremely passionate.
Amazing.
The core. That's a double-edged sword. Passion can go both ways. So, you're seeing what the pitchforks and the torches for Gus Malzahn, but you're also
can't get one without the other, Andrew. You can't get one out of. You can't want the passion and not take the crazy. Like, so. It's like that old saying about hot girls. Like, the hotter they are, the crazier they come. Look, man.
Hey, look, I like to, I love
to,
I love to troll the fans like the best of them, because some of them are just really easy to mess with. But the truth is, I love UCF's fan base. They're so passionate. It's great to see that even in a bad season, there's still a lot of emotions invested. And in a good season, you see it in both ways. It's like those Dr. Pepper commercials where they're cheering and then they're screaming and they're cheering and it's going back and forth. No different here. But I think you're gonna see a decent core of fans there to celebrate the players who have done so much for this program. RJ Harvey is statistically the second best running back in UCF history, which is wild, because he was a quarterback at Virginia before he transferred to UCF. So it's just absolutely amazing at how this is all played out. The big question is, okay, 2024 ends. What happens in 2025? Because that's when that fan apathy that you may have seen if they didn't love these players like they do, which show up this weekend. That's where it starts to creep in next year, when it's time to renew and decide, am I going to invest in this program still? That's where Terry Mohajir is going to have to think long and hard on what's going to happen with this program. We talked about the cash issues. Are they willing to really dig themselves into a financial hole to make a change?
Yeah.
Or are they going to, like, you know what? There's a lot going on. There's the house settlement and all this other stuff. We've got cash all set aside for these capital projects we're doing. So, remember, UCF only got $18 million in Big 12 payouts last year. And, you get paid at the end of the academic year. So they get $19 million this year, but they don't see that money until the summer. And then they start getting the normal payouts. So right now they're still lean compared to their Big 12 peers and just in general compared to all the other power conference schools. In fact, you based on that alone, Cincinnati and Houston are the lowest three, paid outside of SMU programs in, currently. That'll change once the new contract kicks in next year. So do you bite the bullet and deal with this for one more year, and you lower the buyout, and UCF can start setting cash aside, because I don't think they expected that a potential firing was up in the air. I think UCF needs just a little bit of time to kind of put this together. I would give Gus one more year, very begrudgingly. I understand the fans. My take on and keeping him is not because of the on-field product. It's financial. You can't cripple the rest of your athletic program to make a change, but something's got to give here. He's either got to make some real hardcore changes, or someone above him is going to have to.
Yeah, it's tough. This is tough math here. But I told you, I'm not sure that moving on. I know how fans feel. I've experienced the Gus Malzahn experience multiple
more than
times.
once.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I understand the frustration, but the grass is not always greener on the other side. So I can tell you that from experience as well. So they're gonna have to figure something out. But you know what? We're gonna be here to talk about it.
We're going nowhere.
I don't think we'll be covering a coaching search this all season. But look, man, you can go out and you can show some pride versus Utah. You can show that your team hasn't quit and that you can still inspire guys to play if you're Gus. Figure out a way to make this your Super Bowl somehow. And you mentioned, I'm glad that you brought up UCF fans, at the beginning of your diatribe there. They've been amazing. UCF fans have been amazing through what has not been a great season. Right. It's just not been a great season. So lots of disappointment there. I don't think that UCF fans thought the floor was missing a bowl game this year, especially with a lot that's been happening in the Big 12. But look, no matter what happens, we'll be back to talk about all of it. Andrew, before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on Twitter /X/Blue Sky. I finally took the dive on that one.
I did too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's growing. It's about reaching people and
3 followers.
3 followers. Yeah. I am not one of them. Yeah. Don't feel bad. I'm like at 40. I feel like weird to have so few, but it's all part of the game. But you can catch me at any of those at StatBoyDrew, and you can catch my ratings at the Last Word on College Football, part of the Last Word on Sports family.
Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Look, thank you for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out our friends at the Big 12 podcast. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12, including UCF. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here tomorrow with more Locked On UCF.